Pat McCabe. I've been on the rodeo board for 40 years. I went on in about 1960 or 84, 83, along in there, and I would go help them. That's the way I got on, and if you was a pretty good helper, they'd want you to stay a while. So I think I overstayed my welcome for 40 years, but it was well worth the time spent just helping the community out and figuring out how to get people in the stands, and what's really amazing, how it grew from when I got on in 1984, how it grows to where it is today.
So I'm Doug Smith, and I came onto the board in the fall of 1976. So this basically makes a full 50 years that I've been involved in the Crooked River Roundup. My family goes back farther than that. For instance, when Jess Kane founded the Roundup in 1945, I am told that the first share of stock was sold to my great uncle Sumner Houston. And two of the original board members, Lance Smith and Herm Meader, were my great uncles. And then the year I was born in 1956, my dad joined them on the board of directors. And I actually have a belt buckle, a little bitty one, that was given to me in 1963, and we had taken care of a horse that the Kiwanis was raffling off, and they were keeping it at the fairgrounds. And at the time, we lived about 2 blocks from the fairgrounds. So this story was my brother and I took care of the horse, and in exchange, I have this cute little horse head belt buckle, which is one of probably 4 or 5 buckles now that I've accumulated. I've been in charge of the horse racing since, I believe, about 1979 or 80. And other than about 3 or 4 years when I left the board for about 3 or 4 years in 2010, 12, 13, 14-ish, when Les Schwab moved the office to Bend, I found myself not being able to get back in time for meetings, not being what I felt was a worthwhile board member, and so I took a little bit of a sabbatical. And I also had kids going through high school at the time and was chasing sports and their involvement. But it's pretty cool to think that in 1945 they started this thing. It actually was probably the biggest time for the Crooked River Roundup was in the 1950s, when there are stories, when we researched the history for the 50th anniversary, we found stories talking about 5,200 people attending the Saturday matinee performance of the Roundup. And at that time, they were actually running excursion trains out of Portland down through the Deschutes Gorge over and via railroad to Prineville, and they were getting off about where Ochoco Creek Park is now, and then going to the rodeo and getting back on and riding home that night. It was pretty incredible. And if Pat and I know both remember the old grandstand.
Them were historical. To see the grandstands over the top of the buck and chutes, and the old grandstands where when the horses bucked and the bulls bucked, they would buck right up to the box seats sitting on the ground right there. And so then they tore them out and would move the buck and chutes around and whatnot. But it was quite a sight to see that, and we were just little kids when that all happened.
There were when the old grandstands were condemned, the story is Pete Sturza pulled them over with a 9N Ford tractor. They were that far gone. But underneath the old grandstands, they actually used to have the East-West Shrine football game in Prineville, not in Baker City at that time. They played it on dirt out at the Roundup grounds, or as Jerry Pimentel, our longtime sports writer, used to call it the Cow Palace. And they played that. There were locker rooms, old locker rooms underneath the grandstand that very few people knew were there. And it was pretty incredible to get a chance to have Dad go open up the door and take you down and let you wander around in those old locker rooms. They were pretty special. So it's grown a lot. It's really amazing how much the Roundup has changed, and you know, this is our 60th anniversary of horse racing this year. And I know how much work goes into putting on horse races in comparison to putting on one event. They were suddenly going to put on 4 nights of horse racing and do it on the same week that they were putting on a rodeo. There were 15 people on the board. And I thought about this because Harney County currently is talking about running horse racing 2 weeks after us again.
Yeah.
And the belief is that it's going to cost them, in today's money, $1 million. And I go back and I think about, we had no starting gate, we had no jockey's room, we had no parimutuel room, how big of an undertaking it was back in 1966 for those people to raise their hand and said, yes, let's do it. And it's grown into probably the finest 4 days of racing in the state of Oregon. But to think about the risk and putting things on the line to make it happen, and Harney County is going to get a big grant from the state to make it happen. These guys back in 1966 didn't get anything from the state to make it happen.
And a lot of people don't remember that when we started in 1966 racing, we had the parimutuel windows underneath the grandstands, and there was 7 or 8 or 10 of them. And the odds were figured, Jerry Blank figured the odds, and they had high school kids running, and they'd run out there and somebody would write the odds on a big chalkboard out in the infield. Yeah.
So I know one of the kids that spent some time in the chalkboard deal, writing numbers up. That was one of my jobs. I was about 8 years old at the time, and they would call over on a radio and tell us what the new odds were, and then they would dispatch us out with an eraser to change the odds with a piece of chalk on a chalkboard. Yeah. And that was pretty amazing. The other thing was, today if you go down and place a bet, you get a piece of paper about 3 inches long that has your whatever you wagered printed on it. Back then they didn't have printers. 1966, you didn't have little printers to print things out, and so the tickets were all pre-printed, and you only had, like, win, place, show was all you could bet, and so they had pre-printed tickets. So part of the process of figuring out how many tickets were sold was counting the remaining tickets, and that then gave you how many you sold so that you could calculate the odds and the payoffs. Right. And it used to take 7 and 8 hours to calculate the payoffs, or 7 and 8 minutes after the race, by everyone counting their tickets and then running it through a calculator to calculate what the payoff is going to be.
The dark room, photo finish people. We had a quarter horse finish and a thoroughbred finish. But back when we first started, it was, you had to get water and they had to print the films. And it took, if you had an inquiry or a tight race and you had to have a photo finish, it took several minutes we called them cooking the photo. And all of a sudden, the age of computers come in, and now you can place a race on the track, place it, and turn around, and it'll be, and they'll have the picture right there. As you turn around, they'll have the picture of the running at the strip and on a computer, and you can just see it in just seconds. It's come that far.
One of the cool things about a photo finish, right? People think that it's a photo at the finish line, which is real easy to do. I could do that with 2 or 3 of the cameras I've got at home, where you get a finish it right at the wire. What this actually is the, you know, in the old days, the film moved one way. The film would move like this, the horses would go like this, and it would take a slit that is the wire. And so all of those horses are painted onto, in theory, painted onto that film as they cross the finish line. Mm-hmm. And they have the film speed calculated based on the running speed of the horse, so that the horse ends up the right size. But there was quite an art to photo finish. And then we went into a period of time when I first got involved in it, they had a gentleman named Paul Williams that came down here from Miles City, Montana. Every year he would show up, say, "I'm here." He'd climb up into the old photo finish booth and set up, and you never saw him or talked to him unless you needed a picture until the race was over, when he came down and said, "You can give me my check." Mm-hmm. Right? And that was it. And then suddenly the state had an opportunity to buy some photo finish equipment. They bought it. The problem was that it had never been used at night, and we ran at night, and suddenly we didn't have anywhere near enough lighting. And Pat and I have been here. One year we hung movie spotlights over the top of the track, trying to get enough light. We finally ended up with 2 of the big, I guess they're aircraft landing lights, but you could shine them in the air and they'd put the big tower of light clean up to the sky and light up the clouds. But they were absolutely incredibly bright lights, and they worked almost. And then suddenly the state bought a new electronic camera that no longer, they could open the iris up and get enough light into it, and suddenly we got great pictures. And then it got dark, and we figured out, and we started getting lines on our on our pictures, and we couldn't figure out what it was, and it was quartz halide vapor lights. They are not on all the time, they pulse. And now the camera was picking up the pulsing in those lights. It's like they'd move like 600 times or 60 times a minute or second or something. And we were getting these stripes. And so finally now we have LED lights on the finish wire, and we get good pictures. Yeah. So the only time that the dark room is used is during the Crooked River Roundup horse races. So we decided that instead of putting hot and cold running water and plumbing it and figuring out how to winterize it, we would just put a sink into a 5-gallon bucket, and if you only took up 5 gallons of water, then basically 5 gallons of drainage was plenty. So we did that. And then the state came the next year, and they said, "Don't forget to bring us our 5 gallons of water."
Right.
And so Pat and Larry, and there were more than just that involved in it, but Pat and Larry Copes were the main instigators. They figured out how much 5 gallons would be in 12-ounce beer cups. And they filled the dark room up with 5 gallons of water in 12-ounce beer cups. And that was the kind of stuff that you just, when you get done with a show, those are the memories that you remember, right? I think it was 2006, and we had a big hailstorm. And it flooded the arena. It absolutely, I've got pictures of it down at the race office where there's standing water the next morning 4 inches deep on the inside of the racetrack.
Well, that was the 4th of July.
And we sat there and said, there's nothing we can do. And so we actually said, well, what if we took the dirt out, put new dirt back in? We only got, the track's only 65 feet wide. It can't be that big. It can't be that deep. And so we actually got 3 or 4 front end loaders going and hauled the mud out, put new dirt in, and raced the next day. Right. The part of it that everybody remembers was while we were sitting there having the discussion on how to do it, we were all sitting inside the parimutuel room, and here's Larry Copes sitting in a blue bucket on a piece of board across the top of it, and he's got 2 little deals that he's going to use for oars so that he doesn't get drowned in the flood. Right. Because there was actually that much water standing in the parimutuel room. And the worst part was it's 80 degrees or 90 degrees. You had that much hail, which is almost pure water because it's ice. When it melted, it wasn't like 4 inches of snow was nothing. 4 inches of hail is probably an inch and a half of water. And there was water ran everywhere. We had water running off the track and a river running down into the barns. And we just figured a way, found a way.
Yeah, we a lot of puddles on the track, so we just took shovels and went around them puddles and shoveled it one side of if it was on the back side of the track or the inside of the track, we shoveled it and drained it off into the infield or on the outside of the track. Got it all kind of dried up, and that afternoon we kind of worked it, and a lot of the horse people said, "Now you'll have to cancel tomorrow." That was a Tuesday, and we raced on Wednesday evening. And then, what was it, Doug, 2019, we had a flood in the arena, and it rained really hard that year, had a lot of rain, and we were pumping water out. We got the city's vacuum pump, and instead of digging ditches, we took the backhoe and just let it run down the backhoe track over to another where we were pumping it out. And there was nothing and it just kept raining. So we ended up getting a bunch of backhoes and loaders, and we dug a hole south of the fairgrounds right there in the parking lot. And started in at taking mud out and bringing dirt in. So we got that done about 1 or 2 o'clock. And the committee or the bulldoggers, we're supposed to have slack at 10:30, and we canceled it. But we got the mud out of the center of the track, but on the outside of over there next to the white fence on the grandstand side, there was a big chunk of water in there. And we were, at that point, we were beyond what we could do because we didn't have a big enough equipment. So we had Chad McElvan was on the board then, and he was working for Taylor Northwest at Facebook. So he called down and said, he called me on the phone. He said, "Pat, where is the chief of police?" That was Chief Cummins at that time. I said, "He's standing right here." He said, "Send him up to Facebook, him and 2 cars. Send him, what for?" "Well, McElvan's got a plan." So they come down. They had a 12-yard loader, a road grader with about an 18-foot blade on it, and 2 40-yard, 20-yard off-road dump trucks come right into town, went through that mud hole in an hour, took the good old rotten mud out of the way, put good dirt back in. At 4 o'clock we were running slack. And I've seen Red Bluff, pictures of Red Bluff down there where they rained out one year and they were flying helicopters in and out over, trying to dry the ground out. And I don't know if they rodeoed that night or not, but we did. And them guys were standing there, the contestants and the stock contractors were standing there and they couldn't believe it.
So that year it rained on us right after we finished the cattle drive on Wednesday. And it rained hard.
Yeah.
And then we had to figure out how to have slack the next day at 10:30 because the Roundup grounds were totally soaked. We got that done, right, with the process that Pat's talking about. Then the weather was threatening the rest of the week, and then during the actual event on Saturday night,
Yeah.
the last night,
It really come down.
about during the Bulldog, and it started raining, and there are pictures that in behind the bucking chutes where they're standing water 3 inches, 4 inches deep. And there was nothing you could do about it. We just went ahead and did it.
Finished the rodeo.
But getting that one start, getting rid of that first mud was the secret, because from then on we had solid ground underneath. We packed it in with the big trucks and everything.
And the cowboys, they didn't complain. They just, let's just go out here and have fun. So they wallered around and dogged them steers down in the mud and just got muddy. And then the girls on the barrel racing said, okay, we're here, we're going to run. They didn't run near as fast as they wanted to because they're pretty slick, but they did. They didn't say a word, but they knew we were really trying hard. The way we got the arena back in shape, that they said, okay, we're going to stay and do it. We're going to put on rodeo. So that made us feel pretty proud.
So everyone loves a cattle drive. And I can tell you out all the things that I've been involved in as far as the board, I think the one that I always have the most trepidation on is borrowing 20 head of cattle from somebody and figuring out they could end up in 20 different parts of town. And then it's going to be how long, because we got a rodeo to put on, right? We've got usually, like, that's Wednesday night. So Wednesday night, we've got other engagements we're supposed to go to afterwards. And you come down through town, and if it works great. But I've seen them started at 5 o'clock, and we are 9 before we get them all gathered up. We've had cows on Meadow Lakes Golf Course with the sheriff's or the city police mounted police chasing them around the golf course and across the greens, and there's nothing makes a greenkeeper feel worse than, the only thing probably worse than a cow running across his green is the guy behind him that's chasing him on a big old horse running across his greens. We've had some that we've had to rope and drag into trailers in weird parts of town. I've got a picture of me with one I roped down in Ochoco Creek Park and drug back to the Tasty Treat, and we loaded him there. Should have just made hamburger out of him and served patties. But it's the one thing that I think everybody enjoys, but it is scary as heck to think of coming down through town with I mean, we're to the point now to where when you go by what's going to be tonight Cadillacs. Yeah. When you go down through there and they've got their bingo deal set, the cow pie bingo card laid out in the middle of the street, and the people are 20 feet deep on each side, and you're sitting here going, okay, kids, be good. Yeah. And hope you don't run. Hope one of them doesn't jump on somebody. And you go, oh my gosh, how did we do it? And we're on a roll right now. The first 3 times, the only 3 times that we have started and finished with the same amount of cattle has been 23, 4, and 5. Right? And I'm not going to say it's because we became better cowboys. I think we just found better cattle.
Another story was when I was Grand Marshal. In 14, we started from the field out here on the highway at Les Schwab. There's a big parking lot, gravel parking lot out there, and the cows come from Trent Smith up there at Paulina, and they were Angus crossbred heifers and replacement heifers. So they drive them around, they give them a little calm down shot, and they drive them around the fairgrounds. So then they haul them down to that lot out there on the Madras Highway. So we started from there, so we got through town, and we were coming through 3rd Street, and we turned on to Main right there at Bank Drug and Jimmy Lane's menswear and stuff. The cop walked up to me and said, I was leading him, the cop walked up and said, hey, you're gonna have to go down and around and come back on Main Street because we have a officer here with a person with a DUI about to start. And he had the car started in right in the middle of the street. And then I looked at him and I looked behind us and them cows are right there, and I said, well, you just sit there 5 minutes and 2 minutes and we'll be gone. You won't even know we're here. And we walked right by them. They stood there and watched us, and that's something on when you're a Grand Marshal. That's going to stay with you for a long time. You're into cow driving, and cops got a DUI driver right in the middle of the street.
So a lot of people want to know, have you always done a cattle drive? And the answer is no. No. When it started, what happened was so you go back to the rodeo and you look at the history, and we started out kind of as an amateur show the first year in 1945. They didn't have buck and shoots. They didn't have a lot of things. It was more of a snub 'em up, buck 'em out, local show. Then in 1946, they hired Christensen Brothers Livestock out of Eugene to produce the rodeo, and they stayed with us until 1963, I believe, 63 or 64, when it went to Ronnie Raymond. After Ronnie Raymond, we spent 4 or 5 years with Joe Kelsey, and then in the mid-80s or 90s, back in there, we switched to John Growney. Well, John's from Red Bluff, and in Red Bluff, John's ranch is at one end of Red Bluff, and they were running some of the stock on foot into the rodeo arena, including some horses. So John says, I got a bunch of old mares and colts, and I can let them out, and they'll just run down to the fairgrounds, and everything will be fine. So they start the story on the KRCO.
Right.
When they actually broadcast from Prineville. And they said trucks broke down up at Pacific Fruit. Yeah. That's what it used to be. Pacific Produce.
It's right where the garbage containers are now, the people that run the garbage.
So nothing doing, but we got to get the horses down to the fairgrounds. So at 5:40, we're going to let them out and run them, try and trail them down to the fairgrounds. And we're all sitting there on our horses thinking, okay, we'll go at a walk, maybe a trot, possibly a lope. We let the horses out, and they took off at a dead-ass run.
Yeah, and they never stopped.
And they never stopped until they got to the fairgrounds. Mm-hmm. Just like John said, they're going to run down to the fairgrounds. The problem was they're barefoot. We got shoes on our horses, and on asphalt, those shoes are like ice skates.
Slipping around.
And I can remember looking back, and I see at that time Dwayne Meiser, I believe, was the president of the Roundup. Mm-hmm. And I look back and I see Dwayne, and he's going, phew, phew, and it's horses bucking, but we called it jumping graves as he went by the cemetery. It was quite the show. It took us maybe 2 minutes for the whole thing. Yeah. To go from one end of town to the other. And if we hadn't had some people, there were a couple of places they said the horses were wanting to turn off Main Street, but we had people sitting there.
Headed them off in there, and they stayed pretty much, but they went really fast.
But those little things, you know, that's the things you remember, and you sit around and start talking, and there's some great stories. And
that was the year that, so after the horse trail in, then we figured, well, let's have a cow drive. There's a guy out here, Ted Hall, out here on the Crooked River, and I'd call him up, Teddy, I need a trailer load of cows for the cow drive. And then I'd run into Craig Woodard's office and ask Craig if I could borrow his cow trailer. We had a truck. And we'd take it out there to Ted Hall's place and bring in a trailer load, 25 or 30, whatever he could four-wheeler in his corral. But the thing with doing that is they weren't always smothered up. And we turned them loose at the highway market, which Fred Grimes and the Grimes family had for a while, and behind their store, and then we chased them up the highway. And I remember me and Larry Copes come out through Schwab's parking lot one time. We never made it to the cow drive. They was too got away. But it was fun. I mean, we used to go down, we'd run them all the way down through the route and go down Fairview. We caught a lot of slack over that, cows running on people's yards and doing stuff like that, so we had to kind of detour going that far. So then we'd come and turn down Main Street there, 3rd and Main, and go that way. But people loved it. I mean, they just loved it. And sat right there, and several years ago they brought the roping steers in, and Travis Severance had a big, giant longhorn steer out there. And they give him a little cocktail to calm down, but it didn't work on him. But he was gentle enough, he just didn't want to stay. He walked through out there at the Y, the car where they changed the oil at, he went through the car wash. We got him back, and then he come to town with us, and then right there at Erickson's and where the private insurance building used to be, he walked right down the sidewalk, looking in the windows, and people were standing right here on the side of watching the cow drives go, and he just walked by them. And then he'd leave, and they'd go get him back, and finally we got right there at where we turned down 3rd and Main, down by the menswear and down that going to the fairgrounds, and he jumped out there at the Wells Fargo office, between there at the Wells Fargo office bank. And I told the boys, I said, don't bring him back because we got more people around the corner and that might not go very good. So they finally ended up capturing him out there and tied him to a tree until they could get a trailer after him. But he was pretty gentle, but he just walked along, I imagine, but I don't know if we wanted him because that's where most of the people were. There in front of menswear and around on both sides. We didn't want him coming through there. I don't think he'd ever hurt nobody, but he'd step on them, you know, and that'd be a kind of a deal. And I think Chief Cummins was with us that year, and we pretty much scared him to death. He wanted us to quit when we got to the car wash out there at the Y. And we just left the parking lot there to, you know, he was, we can't do it. Oh, hell, come on, get Western.
And the thing is, once you pull the gate, once you pull the plug and let them out of the trailer, there's not any place to load them back up. You can't quit. If it isn't going good, you're just going to figure out how to have fun doing it.
Yeah.
And I laugh because when we had the calf and he was clean down to the restrooms in Ochiko Park. He got out at the old Central Oregonian, and Travis Severance had a couple cornered down in the creek. I got a picture of that. Yeah. And then we went on down and roped this one in Ochiko Creek Park, and we talked later that we brought him all the way back. What we should have done is went on down to Wild Ride and advertised a little bit.
Yeah.
But you think about those things. It's crazy all if you looked at all the places we've loaded cattle from that cattle drive,
all over town.
and how many you have been tied down and picked up later, and some of that kind of stuff, it's pretty crazy.
You know, Larry Coates took off through Schwab's parking lot there at the main office. There was a cow went through there and went out behind, and there was a great big grassy field out there. So he was after that one, but when I was going with the herd, and a calf got away, so I ended up chasing that calf around town down near to Ochico feeding back, and why he'd come down the right street and run into that little pasture where Larry had the cow stopped, I'll never know. But when he rode through that, he knocked 2 or 3 mirrors off the side of people's cars with a high rate of speed.
And probably the worst wreck out of the whole deal was Sean was helping us, Sean Connolly was helping us, and one of the calves, they turned and cut it off, trying to hold it in place, and it ran its horns into the side of Sean's pickup. There's some stories.
Oh, we got stories that we could sit here till
You know, the thing that I've always believed in is that if you're going to live in a community, you got to give something back, right? You got to put back what you take. And I've always felt that my way of putting something back was through something I love, which is rodeo and racing, and helping put on the Crooked River Roundup. And so I know Pat feels the same way, that we don't do, people say, oh, well, you do this for the cowboys, you do this for the cowboys. I do it for the community, for the people that I see every day, for the businesses that need something, a big event, in order to put some jingle in their pockets and to make this community stronger, right? And so, you know, I get, sometimes people don't understand it when I say, well, if you go get some candy, and they say, well, we can get it at Costco. I said, don't get it at Costco. I think I see an Erickson's logo on over the buck and shoots. I don't see a Costco. Go buy something from Erickson's. Right, spend your money here in town, and spend your money here with our sponsors, the people that are helping us do this. And I think that's such a great lesson, that not only for our fellow board members or future board members, but for everyone in the community, right? Find the people that are putting money back and putting time and effort back into your community, and support them.
I know when I first got on the board, you had Douglas horse racing, and Pete Sturzer was he was the arena director, rodeo. And they had committees on tickets and whatever. But it didn't take long to figure out that if somebody come to Joe Blow board member and had a problem, he took care of the problem. He didn't have to go talk to this guy or that guy. He took care of the problem, was settled, and that board worked like that for years. You would have somebody, oh, we need something done with these tickets, or we need chairs over here, or something's wrong here. The first board member you come to that wearing a white shirt, they would take care of it, and that was, it might not have been their prestige, but the board backs you 110%. Because there was never no fighting among us or nothing. They would just, what we did for the community. And took care of our problems and their problems, and when they left the rodeo, everybody was happy. And it's still that way today.
And so that's all you get, folks. I hope you've enjoyed it.